Can you imagine a smell so bad, so completely and utterly disgusting that it could change a city forever? Well, in the summer of 1858, London found that out the hard way. We're about to dive into an incredible story of filth, disease, and the absolute engineering marvel that was born from this citywide crisis. So, picture this. It's London, during the long, hot summer of 1858. This cartoon right here, it perfectly captures how people saw the River Thames. This wasn't a landmark, It was a messenger of death. The river, the very heart of the city, had turned into a lethal threat. And believe me, the unbearable smell was just the beginning. I mean, the stench was so overpowering, it brought the entire government to a standstill. A report in the Times described politicians in the brand new Houses of Parliament, built right there on the riverbank, being, and I quote, instantaneously driven to retreat. They were literally forced from their own rooms by the smell. The crisis had officially arrived at the very doorstep of power. So, you have to ask, how on earth did London's famous river get this bad? Well, it's a story of a city that was just growing way too fast for its own good. For centuries, London kind of managed its waste. Back in medieval times, you had night soil collectors doing the dirty work. But as the city's population just exploded, those old methods completely failed. Smaller rivers got covered over and turned into sewers, and new cesspits, well, they would literally explode from all the methane building up. But the final straw? The flushing toilet. A brilliant invention, for sure, but it funneled every last bit of London's waste directly into the Thames. So by the time we get to our story, the river had hit its tipping point. It wasn't really just water anymore. It was this thick, bubbling soup of human sewage, industrial chemicals, and waste from slaughterhouses. And that summer heat was basically just cooking it all into an unbearable, toxic stew. But here's the thing. The horrific smell was just a symptom. The real killer was invisible, it was silent, and it was lurking in the very water that Londoners were drinking. Cholera. Just look at these numbers. Cholera wasn't a new problem. Outbreaks were sweeping through the city, killing thousands in 1832. But by 1848, the death toll had more than doubled. We're talking tens of thousands of people dying, and the contaminated river was the obvious cause. And the public's fear was just palpable. You can see it in cartoons like this one. It shows Father Thames, this filthy character, presenting his hideous children, diphtheria, scrofula, and cholera, to the city. People knew the river was killing them. The big question was, how? Okay, now this is the crucial scientific debate of the whole era. The authorities, the entire medical establishment, they all believed in what was called the Miasma Theory. Basically, that disease was spread by bad smells, by foul air. And, it kind of made sense, right? The stink was awful and people were getting sick. But one man, a Dr. John Snow, he had this radical, totally different idea. It wasn't the air. It was the water. Dr. Snow was basically a medical detective. During the 1854 outbreak, he meticulously mapped out all the deaths in one neighborhood, Soho, and traced them all back to a single water pump on Broad Street. And to prove his point, he famously removed the pump handle. And just like that, the local epidemic stopped. He had the evidence, he proved the link, but astoundingly, the authorities still clung to their miasma theory and just ignored his findings. And tragically, Dr. Snow wasn't the only one being ignored. This entire catastrophe had actually been predicted for decades. Get this, 30 years, 30 before the Great Stink, an artist and engineer named John Martin proposed this unbelievably advanced plan. He designed a massive embankment that would contain a huge sewer to intercept all the waste. He even proposed technology to filter it before returning clean water to the Thames. It would have solved everything, but it was seen as too ambitious, too expensive, and so it was never built. And then there was Michael Faraday, one of the greatest scientists in history. He saw the danger too. This cartoon from the Times shows him politely offering his business card to the disgusting figure of Father Thames, basically saying, you seriously need some professional help. Faraday wasn't just inspiring cartoons. He actually took a boat trip himself and wrote this scathing letter to the Times. He described how the filth was so thick it rolled, and I quote, up in clouds so dense that they were visible. He said it plainly. The whole river was a real sewer. And still, the government did nothing. It took the Great Stink itself, that unbearable smell invading the very halls of Parliament, to finally force them into action. And the result? It would be one of the greatest engineering marvels of the 19th century. 18 days. Once the problem was literally under their own noses, the politicians who had ignored decades of warnings rushed a bill into law in a record 18 days. It's really amazing how quickly things can get done when the right people are inconvenienced, isn't it? The man for the job was Joseph Bazalgette. He was already an engineer with the Metropolitan Commission of Sewers, and he was given the absolutely monumental task of cleaning up London and saving the Thames. Bazalgette's plan was pure genius in its scale and its simplicity. So instead of letting all the sewage just flow into the river, he decided to build 82 miles of enormous intercepting sewers running parallel to it. These sewers would catch all the waste, which would then be lifted by powerful pumping stations and discharged way downstream, east of the city, where the tides could carry it out to sea. And the plan also cleverly incorporated the construction of London's famous embankments, which reclaimed land and housed these huge new pipes. And here is the truly incredible part. Bazalgette didn't just solve the problem for his time. He famously said, well, we're only going to do this once, and there's always the unforeseen. So he calculated the pipe diameter he needed, and then he doubled it, just in case. And because of that amazing foresight, much of his Victorian sewer system is still the backbone of London's sanitation today, over 150 years later. You know, the story of the Great Stink really shows that sometimes a crisis has to become completely unbearable before we're finally forced to act. It really makes you wonder, with all the scientific warnings we have today about issues like climate change or plastic pollution, what is the Great Stink that we're all choosing to ignore right now?